All right, I think we're all ready to go again. So I'm going to move right into the board reports. Excuse me back there. Maybe we could quiet down a little bit. Okay. Thank you. So let's turn it over to Director Bethel to give us a report on a committee on accessible transportation. Dr. Bethel.
Good morning, board members, and to those of you who are here, board members, you do have in your packet the highlights from our CAT meeting that happened in September. We're very appreciative in CAT, as always, the reports that we get in terms of the LIFT eligibility reports and operations. Did a great job on last year in fiscal year 14 and being able to serve those who are of our disability community. And CAT, the members continue to ask great questions and give good suggestions as we continue to work on some things. And I'm thankful always they are to TriMet staff in terms of what they're able to do and facilitating and answering questions for those members who are there, a part of that board, and the general public that attends. At this time, since you have a written report, I'll take any questions that our board members may have.
Questions from board members? I just want to say this, I read the detailed minutes of the meeting, and you folks covered a lot of information in your limited amount of time there. I was very impressed. Thank you. Right, do you want to keep
Thank you.
Moving on to the TriMet Accountability Committee?
It is a pleasure to report to you about TAC, the TriMet Accountability Committee. I want to say community because we are a community. This was something that came out of the Secretary of State's audit report. At our last week's meeting, we finalized the communication plan for the materials of the ethics hotline, which goes live today. Today it goes live, and later our general manager, Neil McFarland, in his town hall meeting will be talking to others and implementing those as the oncoming days and weeks go, putting that fully into place. At our last meeting, I had so many commissioners and representatives this morning, but Director Prosser mentioned to us about the whole opportunity of being able to report and do it more timely than on an annual basis. And I will give you an update in October to the entire board about how our first month goes in dealing with the Ethics Hotline phone center. We also reviewed and discussed our feedback that we received the Accountability Center survey. We put out a survey. We got 68 responses, and we intend to post all of those responses by Tuesday, September 30th, which is a few days away. Some of those things from the public will be posted and are already posted on our Accountability Center, which are available at trimet.org, and even some of those suggestions related to records that are available through public request process as well. That information is already on TriMet, but again, you can find that at the Accountability Center as well. So with the completion of these last three pieces, the Ethics Hotline, soliciting feedback on Accountability Center, and incorporating that feedback into what we do on the TAC page, the Accountability Committee has delivered all of its action items stemming from the Secretary of State's audit. We will continue to meet monthly throughout the rest of this year to fine-tune any issues that are needed, and then we will likely begin in 2015 meeting quarterly. So with that, we feel great that we accomplished all of that, and we also want to note that we were ahead of time of what we told the Secretary of State's office we would do. Excellent. Any questions?
Congratulations.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Just a comment. Maybe we can have some time with the very busy Secretary of State to come before the board and talk with us after this is all squared away.
That's a good suggestion.
Just to note a report on that whole list of recommendations here with my comments, but it may be at the one-year anniversary of their report, which is January. That might be a good time to do that.
Good time.
Good. All right, well, let's move on to the Transit Equity Advisory Committee. Director Zaragoza.
Yes, good morning. We had our meeting last week, and Neil was there to answer questions about the committee's frequent service recommendations, as well as provide feedback on the committee's work, and answer any other questions that the members may have. The TAC, or the Transit Equity Advisory Committee, is a very involved and informed group, and it's really great to have the questions that come forward to us. We had 2 new members, and one was a young woman, Ana Mesa from the Multnomah Youth Commission. You know, I must say that the youth that we've had on the on TIAC are amazing. These young people, you know, of course I compare myself, which has been a really long time ago, but these young folks today that have been on the committee have incredible questions. They're so well informed, and they're incredible advocates. So sometimes you sit back and you think, oh, how would I answer that? So they're very, very forward-thinking, very progressive, and have some really incredible questions that they bring forward. In addition to Anna, we have Nicole Phillips, who's from Bus Riders Unite, who we heard from earlier. She's on the TIAC committee as well, a new member, and we're really glad that she's there and also has the questions for us that we really need to think about, so thank you. In addition to that, we talked about the development of what we call our Transit Equity Index, that we'll be bringing additional information in the coming months. So I don't know, Neil, if you wanted to say anything about your time with us?
I think it's an excellent group. I really enjoyed the interchange, and I'll look forward to coming back again, of course, as the committee sees fit. But I thought your summary was excellent.
Great, thank you.
Questions for regarding TIAC? Okay, seeing none, thank you very much. Let's move on then to Director Prosser, who can give us an update first on the Metropolitan Policy Advisory Committee, Metro Policy Advisory Committee, and then what we did at the last Finance and Audit Committee. Director Prosser?
Okay. Metro's Policy Advisory Committee goes by the acronym of MPAC. Their last meeting, and actually for several of the next meetings, the primary topics revolve around the growth management decision, because a new growth management report is due here next year or the year after it. But it's a lot of work, and they're spending a lot of time briefing members of MPAC, which are representatives of all of the jurisdictions within the metro boundaries. So they're briefing those members on the elements that will go into that plan. And part of the discussion we had last time was to prioritize topics for the upcoming meeting. So this will be something that will be continuing for several months now. And then the second major part, and again, this is something that we've been working on for quite some time and will continue to work on for a while, is the Climate Smart Communities report, which again is a report that all areas within the state are required to do by the state legislature. And we're put together a strategy on how to reduce our carbon footprint by, I believe it's 20%. And so we've had one joint meeting with the Joint Policy Advisory Committee on Transportation, which is again a Metro committee, representatives of government, but really focused more on transportation. And we are coming up to another joint meeting with them on November 7th. So what MPAC was doing at our last meeting, again, was going over possible topics for that joint meeting. So it's moving forward. We have narrowed the scenarios down. We originally looked at 3 different scenarios that would save different amounts of carbon, and we're really beginning to hone that down and narrow it down. Still more work to be done. So if any questions about impact?
I'm seeing none. Why don't you continue on in Finance and Audit?
Okay, Finance and Audit Committee. We're going to get a report from our auditors today, and I promise not to steal their thunder, so I'm not going to say too much. But we have had 2 meetings with our auditors, a planning committee meeting or pre-meeting, and then we had a post-meeting where the Finance Committee did hear their report, so we know what's in it. The rest of you will find out in a few minutes here. So it was a very good process, and I think kudos go to the auditors and also to our staff for working very hard on that. we needed to save their thunder because we were saying that when you talk about finance, it's really not that exciting unless something is really wrong. And so, it's not going to be a real exciting report, folks. So, any questions?
I don't see any. Thank you very much, Director Prosser. Appreciate it. All right, well, let's move right into the general manager's report. And first off, I'll turn it over to our general manager, Mr. McFarland.
Mr. Board President, members of the board, and distinguished guests, we're really, really happy to be here in Ride Connections headquarters. And I'd like to offer my personal thanks to Elaine and her staff for hosting us here. But I also would just take a moment to reflect on this great mission that Ride Connection has and how important it is to work together with us. And they have been an incredible partner, whether it's been the low-income fare mitigation program, helping seniors and people with disabilities actually get to their destinations. You heard earlier the comments from Chris Walker. And, one of the notions that I think is important for all of our riders and our clients to understand is that we will do all we can to serve them well. But it's that, it's the quilt of services that we put together as a region that really helps us serve people well. And Ride Connection has been an incredible partner in providing those services to our clients and really helping our whole region continue to move. When I say whole region, I mean everybody in our region, give them the gift of mobility, which is so important to life and economic prosperity. So again, thank you, Elaine, for your great work. This is a symbol of how far you've come, but I also was thrilled to hear Elaine say there is room for growth in this building because we have an enormous need in front of us as a growing region, as a growing proportion of people who are my age who will frankly need these kinds of services as we continue to age. So again, we have a lot of work to do together. This is a great point to celebrate the work that we've done and the great work that Ride Connection has done in creating this facility. But I'd also look forward to the partnership and the great work that we have ahead of us. I also wanted to particularly thank Dan Valliere, who I think may have moved on, but anyway, again, another great partner with REACH, and we continue to look for ways to partner with REACH and other community development organizations around our region. We do know that that connection between housing and transit is absolutely essential, particularly for those of limited means or limited mobility. And so what we really do need to do is figure out ways, and I was very pleased to hear our state representatives acknowledge that as an issue that we as a region really need to focus on. So again, my thanks to everybody who has been here to emphasize those points. I did want to respond to a couple things related to the public comments. One is Steve Couts is here, who is the project manager for the East Side Service Enhancement Plan. He's been out in the community meeting with groups. And we recognize that it's hard to hold a public meeting, get people to come to it, so sometimes we have to go to them. And again, if there's anybody who really wants additional input on that, Steve is the guy to see, and we're more than happy to meet with everyone who's interested in this. We have clearly heard the message about North-South service, and we have clearly heard the messages about connections, for example, on 122nd, the 71 bus line, the need for additional service, the 20, creating that, filling in that grid that actually works so effectively from 82nd Avenue to the river, needs to continue and grow further east in terms of a really strong service pattern. And I know that will be the focus of the service enhancement plan we're there. But I'd also emphasize another notion that you heard, which was that access to jobs is critical. And when this Columbia Corridor Association recently did a really interesting mapping study where they mapped where do their employees live. And there's a very significant concentration of the employees who work in the Columbia Corridor in this neighborhood and East Portland. So again, we're beginning to get that kind of data and reinforcement of the service design that needs to serve the population here much more effectively. And I think bringing together community input with that data is going to give us a very rich and very successful, I think, service enhancement plan for the east side, just to make those notes. And I did want to also note that related to, yes, yep.
Our facility is on Airport Way, and we have a large facility that can seat 300. So we open it to various groups. So if you let me know, we have all the bells and whistles and indoor plumbing and everything else. But anyway.
Great electrical devices, I'm sure.
Yeah, we got solar EV charging. Yeah. But if you want to use that for the east side meetings, feel free. Holler at me.
Thank you. Appreciate that very much. I'd also just note that related to service, when and you'll have a further update on the Orange Line service plan, but I think there will be some significant improvements in service, not only directly around the Orange Line, but throughout some of the southeast port and the areas that connect to the Clackamas Town Center. So again, I think both jobs access and other improvements in access will come along with that Orange Line service plan as well. I did want to update you on a couple of other things. We did just finish up some major construction of our own related to the Sunset Transit Center paver project that was very successful. It completed 2 days early. Again, we had pavers that were being affected by water and were beginning to come up and not be the nice flat surface that we know is safe and needed by our customers. But we did have 14 days where that station was shut, and our customers were shuttled either to Beaverton or the zoo station to connect to trains. The trains did pass through, so there was no major system-wide effect from that. So it was really a very successful project. I would also note to our MAX customers that we do have many more improvement projects coming. Soon we'll have a track replacement here in the Gateway area. And the apology in advance is that when our main line is maybe available for maintenance work 2 hours, 3 hours a night, depending upon where you are in the system, major repairs will have some service-related effect, and we'll work very hard to minimize that and to provide good alternatives. But that is the nature of the business as we come about to recharge some of the great investments we've made in the past. Also related to improvements, I do want to note that within the next few days, hopefully later this week, we'll take delivery of our first Type 5 light rail vehicle. We have 18 of those vehicles coming for the Portland to Milwaukee project, the Orange Line. This is the next generation of light rail vehicles. It will have a better seating layout with more legroom. We're actually beginning to parallel the old Type 2s, if you will, that have the better legroom in the center section. There'll be new boarding ramps that will improve boarding for customers in mobility devices. Improved air conditioning, improved interior and exterior CCTV system, LED lighting throughout, and a more ergonomically designed cab for our operators. So we're looking forward to the continued product improvement in this. The manufacturer, Siemens, often says that we're not really a transit company, we're an engineering company, because we come to them with a list of product changes that we want to work through. But they love that because they end up with a better product at the end of the day when they work with TriMet, and we're pleased to be in that position. You should know that we'll put these into service, many of them before the opening of the Orange Line, after we put these vehicles through a pretty rigorous test of 1,000 miles before we actually turn them over to operations for service. And obviously we'll have some celebrations and unveiling as we get to those points. As Dr. Bethel noted, we've now had about 9 months since first seeing the Secretary of State's audit recommendations, and I wanted to give you a quick update, and there's a written report in your handouts as well about where we are with that. We are, again, 9 months into implementation, and we've made some tremendous progress as well. If you remember, there were actually 23 recommendations that came up through from the Secretary of State's audit report. We said we would implement all of those, and we are well on our way. One key area was related to safety efforts, and we've been regularly updating you on those. So I think, again, I'll skip to some other areas. One is government and management. The second will be external communications and relations. And third is managing operations. In the area of government and management, the audit reaffirmed our financial situation, calling, and I'll quote from the audit, most serious and looming concerns are the health benefit costs of employees and the unfunded liability to pay these benefits for current and future retirees, as well as their beneficiaries, end quote. Since that report, we have been very aware and before of this situation and began developing with the Finance Committee and others the strategic financial plan that this board adopted in July. And again, we now have a roadmap to address this situation. We also continue negotiations with the ATU over a new contract with changes to address these issues and these liabilities over the long haul. We've also added a fourth strategic goal to our agency's 5-year action plan, which is to strengthen the TriMet team to reflect the audit's primary focus on improving employee engagement and communications. So that's where the employee hotline that is active as of today, and I'll announce and introduce at a town hall that will be broadcast to all TriMet facilities this afternoon. So turning that on is a big step. Turning to external relations, external communications and relations, while the audit gave us good marks on where we were, we all and the audit team recommended a number of areas to improve our transparency, including the the Accountability Center that Dr. Bethel referred to, and Shelley Devine and staff has given you an overview in the past. You should also know we will be conducting an attitude and awareness survey this fall as recommended by the audit. And we're continuing to look for ways to engage the community in our service enhancement plans, as we've been talking here on the east side, but also other parts of the region as well, and over the new bus service plan that supports the opening of the Orange Line. And finally, in our quick update this morning, and centered around managing operations, we have been doing a lot of work to involve the people at the front line in improving our operations. So we have developed a number of continuous improvement teams, including ones dealing with schedules, with bus purchases and design, with layovers and restrooms. And we're also looking for feedback and suggestions from our operators as we launch in less than 2 weeks an internal web connection for operators. We've termed this the Operators Portal, that will have in one place an ability and a place for operators to make any suggestions on any topic, whether it's safety, layover schedules, or other service-related items. We're looking forward to those suggestions and that continued deep employee involvement, because we know those suggestions will do nothing but make us a better organization. Per my earlier comment, we'd like to report back to the board in January, which is the 1-year anniversary of those findings, and perhaps that's an opportunity to invite others back to hear that full report and offer their comments and suggestions to us as we move forward. Any questions on that portion of the report?
I don't see any. Thank you very much.
Let me move forward. Finally, I wanted to mention that I just returned yesterday from the Railvolution Conference held in Minneapolis. I was pleased to have Board Member Prosser along as well. You might recall that this was an organization that was actually started, I'll bet you it was 25, maybe more years ago. I'll show my age. In Portland, for Portland neighborhoods by Representative Blumenauer. Someone had the bright idea at some stage that maybe other communities would benefit by participating. And that has now grown to a conference which is attended by over 1,400 people, people from all over the country, that rotates all over the country, 7 different nations. The topics range from design of rail facilities, and they're supporting bus networks, funding. A big thread of conversation this year was equity. I had the opportunity to participate in 2 different panels. One was a It's a review of where different streetcar circulators around the country are and some of the issues they've had and how they've overcome them. And also a second one where I was pleased to participate with the general managers of the MBTA and the RTD in Denver on an interesting panel topic, which was what keeps you up at night, Mr. General Manager. So I shared a few of my nightmares along with other more positive things. But again, it's a very, very positive group, which actually is very enlivening, and next year we'll be in Dallas. So, Mr. President, that concludes my report.
If I can piggyback on Bill's comments about Revolution, first, thank you for the opportunity to go. It was a very worthwhile opportunity, and I think as a board member to be able to get into some of these issues in a little more depth, I think is very useful. I did attend a mobile workshop that talked about, it turned out part of it much more interesting than I expected. It was really talking about the partnership with the Minnesota Department of Transportation and some of the things that MnDOT, as they call it, is doing to help foster and support transit. Kind of the takeaway was MnDOT is much more transit friendly than we know out here, and it was really encouraging to see. They have things like they have 300 miles on freeway of bus express lanes on the shoulders of freeways, which is mind-blowing. It's not all connected because not all shoulders can bear that traffic. So, but that was a very interesting concept. Also learned about bus rapid transit. That's something we're going to be looking at here. Didn't know much about it before, so I understand it better. I still have kind of a lot of concerns and questions that we'll be asking, but I'll be in a better place to do it. The one thing that I really did want to bring to everyone's attention, I did attend the session that Neil mentioned about what keeps general managers up at night. And, in truth, a lot of the things that all of the general managers mentioned, I think as board members, we probably could have predicted what those would be. It's things like service issues, funding, the federal funding issues, workforce issues, training, that type of thing. There was only one general manager that mentioned one issue, though, and that was Neil, and that was safety. And safety is so important. I was really surprised that the other general managers did not mention that. So kudos to Neil, and I think that really is a reflection of how this agency is putting so much emphasis on safety, which is so important to our customers. So, thank you.
Questions for Neil? I guess while I've got you here, I asked you a little bit earlier, maybe you could elaborate. I saw in the correspondence part of our agenda, there was a letter from the Service Employees International Union who was concerned about our competitive process for hiring for security services, essentially saying that we were going with a low bid, and that just surprised me that would be how we would procure security services. So could you just tell me what's actually happening there?
Yes, so we do procure those services through an RFP process, which considers capabilities and service levels and that sort of thing. The other thing I would mention, and perhaps as because of the size of our contract and the demand we put on these services, there are probably, in our view, maybe 4 providers within the region that are of a size and magnitude that they can actually respond effectively to the TriMet requirements. And my understanding is all 4 of those are actually organized properties, or organized businesses. So I think there's not a lot there to worry about, but we'll double check and make sure that our process is fair.
So you'll be responding on behalf?
Yes, we will.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Okay, moving on, then let's go on to the most exciting part of the agenda today, right, is the presentation of the audit findings by our audit firm, Moss Adams.
And Nancy Young, who have led the audit process for Moss Adams.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Morning.
Thank you for setting it up so well for us this morning. And we will try to exceed expectations. But you're absolutely, Board Member Prosser was exactly right. I don't think that you would want, as a board, to sit here and want your auditors to come in and make it a very exciting engagement. But we want to let you know the level of work that we completed and have issued and will issue the financial, or they have been issued and dated, but we'll release the financial statements today. There we go. So what we want to talk to you a little bit about is the nature of services we provided, what our opinions and reports are that we send out, some of our critical audit areas that we took a look at, some required communications, and then we wanted to talk to you about some upcoming audit standards, or an audit standard that hit this year because it was a pretty significant impact on the balance sheet. So we'll talk just a little bit about that. So here's the good news. We issue quite a few opinions and reports through the course of this audit process. Our staff and ourselves spend well over 1,000 hours on site to look through the financial results of TriMet. And in that, we issue several different types of opinions and report. The first being over your financial statements and your financial reporting. We look to make sure that your financial statements are materially stated correctly. In the audit world, an unmodified opinion is the cleanest type of opinion that you get. I mean, that's the type of opinion you want as a board. And we're pleased to report that this year, TriMet once again got an unmodified opinion on the financial statements. Oregon has a set of about 13 different rules or laws that we also have to take a look into, and we provide to the state a report on the Oregon municipal standards. And in that report, we have to, it's an interesting report because as we work through the financial statements, materiality we don't look at every single transaction. But it's interesting on the Oregon municipal standards, though we don't look at every single transaction on that as well. If we find one instance of noncompliance, just one, we have to report as the entire process was not compliant. And so there are two probably pretty major things we look at, one being the purchasing and the procurement cycle, two being the budgeting cycle. And we're pleased to report, again this year, you had no issues in any of the areas and no issues of noncompliance on the Oregon municipal standards. Because that you also get a great deal of federal funding, we also spend a significant amount of time in what we call our A133, or our single audit. And what this audit is the feds, or the federal government puts down, FTA primarily, puts down a set of criteria that they want us to audit to. And they give us a lot of information that they want us to go a lot deeper than you would normally go into some areas on financial statement opinions. So we issue a report, both a governmental auditing report and an issued report on your schedule of federal expenditures. That has also come with all clean opinions, no issues of findings or question costs. Now, in that area, we spend a great deal of time because the majority of your federal funding is both in your capital assets and in your operation and maintenance over all of your infrastructure. And so we spend a great deal of time looking at the types of expenditures that are going out the door and making sure that they comply with both federal standards and TriMet standards and state standards.
To talk to you about today. You've got the list, as you can see there. A couple of them we wanted to point out. First is your lease and leaseback transactions. As you know, through the history, TriMet participated in a lot of those types of transactions. We're pleased to see some of those dropping off, and we're pleased to see that you're not entering into any new ones as well. On the pension and the implementation of GASB, we're going to hold on that just for a minute. We're going to let Julie address that in a little bit more detail here in a minute. We've already talked about your grant funding and the local budget law and Oregon minimum standards. Some of those areas, additional areas include your cash and investments, looking at the amount that's stated, making sure that we've captured all of your accounts and that those amounts are correctly stated. Looking at your property, equipment, and construction in progress, making sure that those light rail lines, that they really exist. We actually go out and we'll ride the lines just to validate that they are truly, in operation, and we do enjoy that. And we all are very appreciative specifically of that airport line, the red line. So whatever you do, you maintain that line, okay?
Wasn't that supposed to be in public comment?
All right, if we could advance, please. We do have some required communications with you because you are considered those charged with governance. The first areas are our auditor's responsibility under auditing standards, those professional standards, including government auditing standards, and we have conducted our engagement according to those standards. As far as significant accounting policies, those are addressed in the notes to the financial statements. Regarding management's judgments and accounting estimates, as you know, financial statements do include a number of estimates that's made by management. That can include your allowance for doubtful accounts, the useful lives of your capital assets. Management has been consistent in their application of their estimates, and we agree with the underlying assumptions. Regarding audit adjustments made in past, we're pleased to report that there were no past adjustments and no adjustments that we went to management said you need to make these adjustments. So we do appreciate that. Regarding management's consultation with other accountants, what this means is that at times during an audit, the client might not like our opinion or our position on a certain matter, and management might elect to go out to another accounting firm and seek their advice or their opinion. Should that happen, that accounting firm is required to contact us to make sure that they've heard the whole story, both sides of the coins. So we are not aware of any instances where management was opinion shopping. We had no disagreements with management. We have good, healthy discussions, but no disagreements where we could not come to an agreement. We had no difficulties in planning and performing the audit, and there were no major issues discussed with management prior to our retention. As far as audit observations and recommendations, Julie's already mentioned that you had no non-compliance issues with the Oregon minimum standards and no reportable conditions or question cost with the A133 or your federal compliance. In addition, we have no material weaknesses, significant deficiencies, or internal control matters that are required to be reported to you, nor that we felt warranted your attention.
So we wouldn't want to spend too much time on the new Governmental Accounting Standards Board updates or standards that have been implemented, primarily because they've been very active in implementing new things every single year. But this one was a doozy. I think that's a good way to put it. GASB 67 and 68 are very good technical standards. In fact, the Secretary of State, when they brought up the OPEB or the pension question, this is the one standard that's actually getting all the information in front of users of the financial statements. These set of standards went through your pension plan, not your OPEB plan. However, OPEB will follow shortly. But what it essentially did is it's requiring, if you have a pension plan, a defined benefit pension plan, it's requiring you to measure what's called our net pension liability. So what that is it's your total pension liability for all of your active and retired members in the plan, minus what assets you have in trust is your net pension liability, and that is getting put on your financial statements now. Now, that segregates against your funding, so your funding is still determined on a different level and by the board. But at least this is getting the information on the books of all these defined benefit plans. This is a nationwide standard. By the end of next year, 2015, every governmental employer or any employer following GASB will be required to include this. And you'll notice what it really ended up with were 3 line items on the financial statements. The first being your net pension liability of about $168 million. The second is there's some deferred inflows and deferred outflows. And that's really, GASB gave us some time to deal with certain things that change in the actual information. But that $168 million is what's determined as of your year end to be the amount that is owed to your employees and retirees for those pension plans, which is minus your assets and trust. So it is a pretty significant standard that came into play. I will say we spent a tremendous amount of time for this, one, because it was a new standard, but two, because last week I was at a national conference, and I have heard maybe one other entity that early implemented GASB 68, so that one's a little bit early on your financials. So one other one, so I'm not sure if they said they were going to come out this week sometime, so I'm not sure if you are the first in the nation to implement or the second, but you are one of the first two in the nation. So management did an incredible job in getting the information, in dealing with some of the estimate issues and actuarial reporting, and being ready to talk with us about it, and then the reporting that came out of that. So it was one of the easier implementations for one of the most difficult standards that we have facing us in the last 15 years of auditing. So we really appreciate everything that they did for the standard. So, well, so essentially, again, it's Governmental Accounting Standards Board. And the reason the early implementation, because we already report your pension plans, it makes sense to follow those. We're going to be required to implement this, so it makes sense, since they're single employer plans, to go ahead and put it through this year. But the real idea of this, actually, I think it came out of, it's been in the works, well, they've been talking about this for 20 plus years. But in the wake of the economic, not recession, what would we officially call it? Downturn. One of the, exactly. One of the biggest issues facing most governments is the fact that we don't have everything on our financial statements that we're obligated to pay. So there's a lot of standards coming up that are trying to remedy that situation. So honestly, when I look at, though it is a extremely painful standard to implement, lots of information, lots of moving parts, I think it's probably one of the better standards to get on so that people can start having really good discussions. So moving forward, you'll hear, so actually the state of Oregon just released today for the PERS plan, and I know that you're not a part of the PERS plan, but for the PERS plan, they are just finishing their first year of implementation, and then the employers that are in the PERS plan have to start implementing next year. So you'll start seeing more and more information coming out so that you're comparable to the other PERS plans as they come out, if that makes sense. Any other questions on that? So again, our summary, great results for this year. No clean audit opinions and no findings on our federal funding compliance or Oregon legal compliance or the bond debt compliance. Finally, we'd just like to take a moment to thank Dave. This is going to be our last time to be able to thank Dave, I think.
I don't see him in a room.
Okay. I think we said that last time too. So to thank Dave, he was the active CFO during the course of our audit. So we really appreciate all of his input and on his way moving to retirement again. And Lori Baker, who directs the entire audit and puts up with up to 15 of us asking repetitive questions from the very early morning till the very late at night. She spends a great deal of time getting us the information we need so we can be here today. The entire finance staff and the board, we appreciate all your time in completing this audit. Any questions?
I bet there are some questions. Any questions or comments?
I'm going to need your cell phone number because I'm going to the IF convention in Boston, and I might be asked about this, so I'm going to have to I'll holler at you.
Absolutely.
That's great that we're the first. It's smart on our
It is.
part. Really, really is. So thank you for all your work.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for that report. It was incredibly exciting.
We tried.
When if folks in the audience and watching, if you haven't had the joy of going through an audit, then you should. Sign up every opportunity you can to be exposed to this. The unmodified is the new unqualified,
Right.
which I never really understood the unqualified. I have a little better understanding of the concept of unmodified. It means it didn't change. So when I think about the size of our organization, the complexity of our organization, $500 million, billion-dollar projects that we're doing with federal funding, all of these things, we basically, from a perspective of accounting and finance, we have to track all of those dollars in various ways in high levels of detail, which doesn't sit very well with me, so I wouldn't be successful in any of those roles. Lori, thank you for everything you do. Compare TriMet to other organizations of similar size and complexity across the country. Are we in the top, 30, 40, 50% of performance seeing this level of unmodified results. And the other question is going to be the timing. It feels like we just kicked this off just recently, and now we're done, and we've got a great unmodified result, and that's what we want with no findings. Can you talk to us about kind of, again, where we sit in the big scheme of things and some of the things that we're doing, and then also how quickly this was able to get completed?
Right, and I think that all actually goes in together into one. You know, if the clients that don't have everything together, that aren't ready for their auditors when they come out, that don't have everything reconciled and prepared, ready for somebody else to come and externally look at it, those are the clients when you start seeing, and not every one of them, I'm making a little bit more of a broad implication, but the ones that you see that can actually have an audit as quick as we get it done means that they are able to get their reconciliations process done, their financial close and reporting done, so that we can come in and examine all the records and all the information in order to report and provide a clean opinion on it. In most governmental entities, this timeline of the closing process to the audit being complete is relatively unheard of, this quick. So I think that tells you a lot. The fact that there's an unmodified opinion and the fact that there's no compliance issues, both on your federal and your Oregon state, is probably in the top, 10, 15%. I think it's a very good thing. We believe your finance department, and again, there's no questions as to when we come out in the field, they're absolutely ready for us. I mean, they're ready to talk. They give us the time that we need. All the information we've asked for in advance is there. And when we're in the field and ask for additional information, they have it to us in a very quick time frame, which is good for the organization because it gets us out as well, because we're really coming in on top of an already very busy job for the finance department. So overall, I think that seeing the timing and how quickly the process can get done with the sheer volume of work that we do is a testament to the strong operational nature of the finance department.
Thank you.
Nancy, do you have any?
Yeah, I would just add to that it's also indicative that management is taking care of business during the year and they're not waiting to the last minute. And that's really important because that does happen in quite a few of our governmental jobs, is that, just take something as basic as the reconciliations, being done monthly. TriMet takes care of business as it occurs. So.
Right, and just one last, that brings up a great point on that whole GASB 67, 68. We've been in discussions with management and the finance department for probably close to 18 months on this issue. So they bring us in throughout the year. We're not an end of the year auditor where we just have to come in at the end of the year. If there's extreme things like this, they bring us in. Another case in point is your new systems of collections. As there's new ideas out there, as new collection processes come in, we're being brought in on the front end to take a look at what the plans are for that. So I think that's very good as well.
So like GASB 67, 68, that's something that's going on across the nation, and organizations and firms similar to us and other governmental agencies are also having to do the same thing and reflecting kind of this other post-employment liabilities and things of that sort. And where are we, meaning TriMet, on the continuum of moving towards the recognizing that 67, 68 is coming? Are we on the forefront? Are we trailing? Are we in the middle? Where are we in regards to kind of leading that train, pun intended, down the right track?
You're at I was going to say the caboose, that's the wrong end. They're at the very, very front, of the train. Primarily, a lot of organizations, because they're waiting for the PERS plans and they have to wait for the information to come out of them, and that information is yet to be available, can't do anything about it. But when it would have been interesting if you just decided the only thing required was 67 this year, which would have been on the trust side. And it just wouldn't have made so much sense. So for management to sit down and say, what makes most sense for us is to implement both 67 and 68, and to do it before a lot of even the tools were around, and to really, what it took for them to do is to delve into that standard and really understand the dynamics of that standard, and to be able to understand it enough to communicate it and then get the information we needed to audit it is a tremendous amount of effort. So absolutely on the front end. And this is a good example, but you've done it repeatedly in the past. I mean, you look at it and say, or management's looked at it and said, in the past, does it make any sense just to wait for the standard, or does it make sense to just go ahead and take care of it right now? And so the front end is a common occurrence.
One final comment.
All right.
If you'll give me that. Well, hopefully he will, because I'm going to start by just actually saying, giving a great appreciation. When we talk about, I think what we just heard is something that's very significant and a huge compliment to this organization and its leadership. And I think the leadership starts all the way at the top with President Warner's leadership, and then as far as it goes with finance, Director Prosser, I'm very, very ecstatic to serve with all of these board members. And in the finance side, I think Director Prosser's leadership is something that I just enjoy. I enjoy sitting in the finance committee's meetings with him. But then it goes over to Neil and his leadership, and I think an organization and its leadership starts at the top. But then we've got great people and great folks that Neil touches and encourages to get the job done. And so, when I get to sit through a lot of audits, even 133 single audits, which I don't really know what that means, but I've sat through quite a few of them, and some have had findings, and others have had things that need to be fixed. And to see an organization of this size and this complexity, and we come away with the speed and the accuracy that we've just heard is something that I haven't seen in the years that I've been involved in reviewing audits. So I want to say thanks to all the leadership that occurs in this organization, Dave and his leadership, Lori and her leadership, and her dedication to getting things done. Really, really gives me confidence as a board member to go out in these communities and really advocate for the additional things that we need to help a healthy and sustainable organization. Again, I want to thank you guys for your comments and giving us the confidence that we need to make sure that we run a great organization. So thank you very, very much.
Good comment. Good recognition. Anything else from the board?
I would never try to follow that.
I guess I just had one, I need to say on this Gatsby 67 and 68, I mean, this has been an issue that's been on the board's mind for some time. So it's great to see this and kind of everybody saying that our assumptions make sense and that we got some numbers that we can actually depend on. And so I think this will be helpful in many arenas for us in terms of our negotiations, frankly, with the union, and in terms of just having the public understand where we are and why we as a board make the financial decisions that we made. And I was just curious if our financial policies and the strategic financial plan you found helpful in terms of looking at the audit and where things like this, the decisions are actually made on this.
Yes, absolutely. Especially the one that you did on the funding plan for
Yeah,
Gatsby 68, that made a world of difference. So we appreciate that.
Good. All right. Thank you. Again, I appreciate your time and enjoyed talking with you and learning about some of these new standards. And then it's nice to be in the forefront. It'll be fun to see how this all ends up 5 years from now with across the nation. So again, thanks for what you do, and we'll look forward to seeing you next year. Thanks. All right. I think the last item on the director's report is, let me get back to the agenda here, is the safety update, overview of the rail activation process for the Portland-Milwaukee Light Rail.
Perhaps I can introduce Kurt Wilkinson, who's not a stranger to you. He's presented to you before. He is our safety guru associated with the Portland-Milwaukee project. But I did just want to note that there's about, my count, 340 or so days till the opening of the Portland-Milwaukee project. But who's counting, right? But actually many people in TriMet are counting, because this is a very, very important effort for us in so many different ways. But our overall goal is to make sure that this operation, when it comes off, is safe. And Kurt will tell you a little bit about the processes that we go through to create that assurance for you and for me and the rest of the community. Kurt?
Good morning, members of the board. It was great to hear Director Prosser talk about how Neil mentioned safety as a high priority, and it really is, and the support from him through my director, executive director, down to me to make sure this process happens is really good. So I think we'll come out with a good product that I'll kind of define here in the next couple of slides. Just to talk about the first picture really quickly, this was the first light rail vehicle that was actually towed over the new bridge over the Willamette River. So I took this as an important piece of what rail activation is. We actually took it from Portland State University all the way over the bridge into southeast Portland, where we pulled into a pocket track and did some clearance testing and pulled it back across. That's one of many activities that was done, but I figured it was pretty impressive to see. I think this was actually our first LRV ever delivered to the property on the bridge, so I thought this was kind of cool to put as an opening slide just to note.
Video on the website taken from that train, and it's, of course, they had to speed it up dramatically, otherwise you would have been there a long time. So it is interesting to watch the employees accompanying it walking faster than the train. So.
Very, very careful the first time we take the trains out. A lot of clearance testing is done with signage and platforms and actually track work. So there's a lot of eyes out there that actually follow the train from front and back and side to side, make sure that we have everything measured out correctly. So that was one of the tasks that we'll actually talk about. It gets skipped past one of my slides. So in general terms, rail activation is a process that's used to make sure that we have thoroughly tested the system and deemed it safe for revenue service. The main focus of this is safety certification. This is where we go through our design criteria and our technical specifications to make sure that all safety and security critical items are actually pulled out from those documents, and they're tracked in a standalone process to make sure that, one, we make sure they get into the design, but two, we actually check these in the field in construction. And that's the most important thing, to make sure that not only do we say we build a safe system, we check it in the field and ensure that it is built correctly. That also ties in with system integration, which part of that train being towed across the bridge is about, to make sure that everything integrates correctly. So when we do open, the system functions as it is supposed to. There's a lot of different elements that actually play into this, and I can kind of click through here and open up these items kind of all at once to kind of show you what goes on. But safety and security touches all the list of items that you see on the slide. Testing is what we're moving into now. We're testing systems equipment with wayside equipment. We're making sure the vehicles can talk to the wayside. We're making sure the hardscape civil pieces of the project are going to work with the moving parts of the project in our systems construction, as well as bringing vehicles out on the alignment. So that's the portion of the project that we're moving into now with the level of construction we're at. We're roughly about 90% done with civil construction and about 30% into the systems portion. So as we get more systems coming on board, that level of testing increases, and we have a huge matrix of tests that I actually track as well and part of the process. To touch on a couple other things as far as the bullets that are coming up. The FRA compliance is huge for us with the shared crossings with the FRA. We package those as standalone pieces to make sure that they function as intended. Maintenance and operations procedures are huge for us. We got to make sure that our folks know how to operate and maintain this new system, and they're aware of all the safety and security aspects and features as they get on board and get trained and out on the alignment. The fare policy and structure, making sure that we're meeting our new e-fare type policies, making sure we're putting in the conduits and the necessary underground type work to, when we do switch over to a paperless type system, we're ready to go with that as well. So safety and security really touches on all different elements of the project through our safety certification process. And again, public outreach, you're going to hear more about, I think that possibly next month, a large public awareness safety campaign that is put through my department as well as community affairs, to make sure that the public is well aware of the safety and security knows of the project once we start to run test trains and into revenue service. A very extensive outreach campaign. The next slide pretty much is a lot of numbers. I guess I'm trying to follow on with the audit folks there and compete a little bit. This is just a snapshot. I know it's a little bit difficult to read. This is just a snapshot of us tracking all the items throughout the project from civil systems and all different functions of the project. We're roughly at about 11,000 items that we check through the safety certification process that I oversee to make sure everything actually works together. This even includes the command center that just opened. We had a full safety certification list, testing and commissioning process to make sure when we said, okay, we're going to run trains and buses from Center Street now, everything worked as it was supposed to, and that was completed before the move actually took place. So we are really tracking everything. This also includes the operational elements. So updated SOPs, new training for our maintenance away folks. Go ahead.
Your acronyms look real familiar to you, but
sure.
maybe not to us.
Our ops folks, maintenance away operators, so all of our track folks, our overhead catenary system maintainers, our signal system folks, we make sure everybody has that field training that's necessary to operate and maintain the equipment as it's supposed to, and we track every one of those. I think there's roughly about 1,850 people that will be trained through the process. So extensive tracking. You can see a big slice of the pie up there is vehicles. And Neil touched on that a little bit earlier about, he said that the 1,000-mile burn-in, we check each car with roughly about 250 items as they're commissioned to make sure they're going to operate as intended once we get out on the system. So that's a big part of that burn-in that Neil spoke about earlier. Operational certification is a big important aspect of the process. Like I just said, we have to ensure that our folks understand what is on the alignment, what is out in the alignment, and what they're going to be responsible for once it is put into service and TriMet accepts the system over from the contractor. So these are just some of the groups that will be involved in training. This is hands-on field training. This is drawings that they need. This is updated, equipment training. This really encompasses everything. So what we do in my department is make sure these programs are developed. We audit them, and then we audit to make sure that enough percentage of the workforce is trained prior to opening the system. So it's very extensive to ensure our employees are up to speed when they actually do have to take this over, and it's really already started on some portions of the project with them being done with the west side. Emergency responder, go ahead. Yes, sir.
If you could just a little bit more explanation. What we see here, all these work elements or people who touch the system.
Yes.
But we have people all over the system that do this. So if you could just explain a little bit more, why do you focus so much on a new line? Don't they have a lot of this experience and knowledge and stuff from the existing lines?
Yeah, a lot of the same like standard operating procedures or how we operate will stay the same, but since it's a new environment, you want to make sure that they're not going out there and being like surprised where new signals are along the alignment, or surprised on how they leave the platforms to go over the new telecom crossing, because there are some staging and some following distance requirements. We have the intermingling of bus and rail on the harbor structure and through the transitway all the way over to 8th and Carruthers. So that is a different operating environment. And we're also mixing streetcar in there, so we need to ensure that those folks are trained as well. So the basic operating elements are the same. The signal system is, the aspects are the same, and how they perform their track walking is the same. But since it's a new environment, we need to make sure that they're fully aware of where they clear out of the way for trains when they're coming, what the sight distances are, where we need to put speed signs along the alignment, how do you access the new substations or crossovers in the signal system if there are an issue. We need to make sure they can respond to the new system just like they do the existing system. Yeah, you're welcome. Emergency responder training is always a big part of the project, and with a project of this size and also going into a new part of Clackamas County with the city of Milwaukee, a lot of the training is focused on how to deal with emergency response, police, and fire action with the new vehicles going into a new section of the area where police officers in Milwaukee aren't used to light rail. We need to make sure they're fully trained on how to access the cars, what they look like inside, what are the emergency considerations, how do you get in the vehicle if it's damaged and the operator's incapacitated. We've already started some of that work. Over the past couple of months, we've had our Fire Life Safety Committee out to Ruby Junction and taken them through all 4 types of vehicles. We just did a tour last week of the west side and the bridge. We walked it from Portland State University all the way over to 8th and Carruthers with fire and police and other emergency responders in the area to just give them a lay of the land to that point. We're going to continue east and south as we finish the alignment so they can kind of see what's going on. And then they are directly involved with developing the emergency drills. So we will do several drills on this project, probably 1 per segment and at least 2 or 3 on the east side to make sure we involve all the different responders that could come to the alignment if there were an emergency for a collision with a vehicle at a grade crossing, any type of those situations, a trespasser on the right-of-way. We developed the situations, do a tabletop exercise, and then we play that out in the field to make sure that any response or any additional information or training they need, we address before we open the system. So emergency response or coordination is huge. And just kind of an overall summary of the program, safety and security certification is the main focus. We're moving more into the integrated testing. There's literally hundreds of integrated tests that go on in the system to make sure it performs as intended. The training and documentation for our maintenance away and operator workforce is just crucial to making sure that system operates and is maintained as intended. lots of testing documents to go through to make sure that the signal system is interacting correctly, the grade crossings act as intended. We just actually had a field visit from 3 different FRA folks that oversee grade crossings, and they looked at all the shared crossings, and then they went away amazed on the work that was done to make those crossings safe. Quad gates on a lot of them, all the bells and whistles you can think of from a pedestrian and auto safety standpoint. They were really impressed with what we've done. So this was part of the quiet zone application process. It went very well. And then also running the test trains to verify operational readiness and effectiveness, making any adjustments before we actually go into service. So there's a lot of pieces and parts to it, but that's kind of the dime tour of the process. Any questions?
In terms of process and your training, with all 3 modes of transportation having to come across the Tillicum Bridge, are you going to, and I'm assuming that you are going to run some pilot testing of how all 3 of those will meet and get across? And one thing in the safety that I would use stress is to operators that we understand that riders will be pushing you by their expressions because you might be behind time, but do not rush across the Tillicum under any circumstances. Be safe at all times.
Correct. They'll go through not only classroom training, but they also have to do hands-on alignment training with those different schemes of if a streetcar and a light rail vehicle are on the platforms at the same time, who goes and when. This is all signal system controlled, so the way that it's going to be set up is a bus will always follow a train, just like on the mall alignment because of stopping distances. But the way that we'll control intervals on the structure itself is cars will be held until they're actually a safe enough distance apart for another one to actually go. So if they tried to leave the platform early, they would be trying to leave on a red signal and actually not be able to go. So those are built in not only training-wise and operational SOP-wise, but you're also controlled by the signal system. So if you do not follow the SOP, we're still in a safe mode of transportation or operation.
Okay, but let me follow on that. I understand that for the trains and the streetcars, but what about the bus?
A bus will run on red, yellow, and green signals, and that will just be run as a normal street operation, but they will need to understand the leaving aspects of the platforms on each side. Much like we had to train with the mall, they knew they had to change from being able to pull out kind of when they wanted to following their own curbside signal and stay at the curb until the train had passed. So it'll be similar to that, but that's why that field training is so important to get all the bus operators out there so they can understand how that interaction works.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Board President, I'd like to add that one of the really important aspects is the training, and we have a very heavy load of training work over the next year, not only ramping up our workforce to continue to add new operators at, frankly, a record pace, but we've just begun the annual recertification for both bus and rail operators, and so those classes are underway. And we're doing that actually a little bit on the early side so that we have room for the specific training, Dr. Bethel, you were just asking about related to the Tillicum Crossing and the new environment that we have that will start next spring and through the summer. I would actually say training is a critical path to opening the project at this point in time, making sure that all of our employees feel ready to operate a safe system will be absolutely important.
Yeah. Can you keep us apprised, maybe every couple of months, get a report, at least to me, through the boards, because I'm like Neil, I did safety for a number of years in the field, and those darn humans sometimes mess up. And second thing, I'm going to guess you got enough backup systems, backups to the backups?
Lots of redundancy.
Redundancy, that's a fancy word, yeah, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Right, okay.
Yeah, no, we can provide some type of update. We can work with you on really what you want to be dialed in to see and provide kind of those succinct updates so you can keep track of how it's going.
I was on a large tech facility on the west side one time, and a squirrel got into a transformer and shut down the whole facility.
We've had squirrel issues on the west side.
I don't know how you stop them, but anyway. Thank you.
Yeah, you're
Good
welcome.
job. And if we can help, holler.
Sure, thank you very much. Appreciate
You
the
bet.
support.
You bet.
Say nothing else, thank you. We ready to move on, Mr. General Manager? You have anything? Okay. Well, why don't we move on to our next agenda item, which is our consent agenda. And for those in the audience, the items on the consent agenda are considered to be routine and may be approved by the board in one blanket motion, and the board can pull anything off the consent agenda they'd like to be considered individually and for further discussion later in the agenda. We only have one item on today's consent agenda, which is the approval of the board meeting minutes for August 13th, 2014. Is the board ready to make a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented?
So moved, Mr. President.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion on the motion or on the minutes? Seeing none, then I'll call for a vote on the motion. All those in favor of the motion to approve the consent agenda, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion is approved unanimously. Let's move on to resolutions. The first resolution is Resolution 14-09-45, which is authorizing the Board of Directors acting in its capacity as the TriMet Contract Review Board to adopt updated contract review board rules. Mr. General Manager.
Board President, members of the board, this update to the TCRP rules actually came about because of state legislation that became effective July 1st, 2014. So that actually put into regulation some new standards related to the findings that you have traditionally made related to allowing us to use a construction manager / general contractor or RFP process associated with our construction efforts. And as you know, we have often used those processes to help improve the delivery of our overall projects. I'm pleased to say that we have been working collaboratively with the state in terms of developing the actual rules. Dan Blocker from our staff was actually on the statewide advisory committee that actually put these rules, these model rules, if you will, into place. As those model rules were put into place, then it became time for us to look at our own review rules associated with these different alternative procurement methods and recommend some changes to you. The changes to a large extent really reflect what we would call best practice. And in many cases, we were doing those practices anyway. They just weren't enumerated in the actual contract review board rules that TriMet had adopted. In every case, we believe these are good changes. They basically are more related to clarification and, if you will, even transparency of the process in terms of declaring upfront what is required out of the contract and what kind of contract phrases are included in that. Examples of that, we need to declare up front whether or not the agency must approve subcontracts or whether we leave that to the contractor. There's also whether or not we will be involved in the resolution of subcontractor protests or whether we leave that to the contractor. And then also if there is a non-competitive subcontractor procurement, how will that happen? What process will be used? So those are all questions that we ask and answer already as we advance CMGC-style contracts. What this asks us to do is just be really upfront about that and make those decisions very clear at the outset when you make your findings associated to allowing us to move forward. So we believe that these are very advantageous rules, that these are good rules that increase transparency, and would recommend your approval.
So I know that Director Esmond maybe had a request and for some additional time to look at this. Director Esmond, do you want to make some comments?
And one of my other hats, I get sort of involved in this, and well, we use the cause célèbre, the Cover Oregon case, contracts and stuff. I need more education. And you, Dan, no reflection upon Dan, and he does it every day, and his staff. But as a board member and a fiduciary and a responsibility, I need to have some education, and so I understand, and so we don't get in trouble. How's that?
So as a result of the comments, I had a conversation with Director Esmond. I've checked with the general manager it would be acceptable to allow this to be carried over to our next meeting for consideration. So unless the board, I think we'll answer questions if the board has some further questions of staff on this, so we're ready for action at our next meeting. But I don't think we have to have a motion to defer it until the next meeting. I would just say let's defer it to the next meeting unless the board really wants to take action right now. So questions or concerns about delaying it? Anything from this end? Not through this end?
No questions on the report, but if this is going to be delayed until our October meeting, when it comes back up, I would just respectfully request perhaps a 5 or 10 minute briefing on this at the beginning of our retreat. Then maybe we'll answer some of the questions that may have arisen, and then we'll be ready for the October board meeting.
Happy to do that, and I'm happy to meet individually, Director Esmond, with you as well, or staff, to sort of go through any detailed questions you may have. Happy to do that.
All right. So then I'll table this, I won't table it officially, I just say we'll carry this resolution over until our regular business meeting in October, okay? Thank you. Well, let's move on then to Resolution 14-09-46, which is authorizing a contract with MSN Communications, Inc., doing business as Mountain States Networking for network hardware and software products and maintenance services and on-call network engineering support services. Mr. General Manager.
Mr. Board members, members of the board, I would say that actually today is a key reason why we need this contract in place. We have been having some network problems this morning, and as you know, this agency runs on electrons as much as it runs on diesel fuel and electricity. And so maintaining a very strong network for communications and internet functions is absolutely critical to the work we do. Because of that, our capital program includes a very well-timed replacement and upgrade of things like servers and other pieces of equipment that are necessary to run that network on a regular replacement cycle that we monitor on a very regular basis. The way that we have procured those sorts of services and equipment is through the state purchase agreement, because we have been able to find the best prices through that volume purchase that has been associated with the statewide effort. In this case, it actually has a little bit of a different twist, which is that this is actually a multi-state contract. So this was actually a procurement that was run, I believe in this case, by the state of Utah, that then was adopted in terms of its results by the state of Oregon. So based on that, we have the ability to use those services. And as you see in the staff report, there's actually very substantial discounts, including up to 41% off list pricing, and related support services up to 21% off that. The cost per service requirements per hour are actually about the same, with about a 3% increase as our last contract in this area. So in other words, it's been a very competitive rate that we're seeing, both in terms of service aspect as well as the actual purchase of the equipment. Again, this is really related primarily to Cisco equipment, which is what our network is based on. And the Cisco systems has been our supplier and is sort of our standard associated with this sort of work. This would be a 5-year contract. The estimated cost is about $8 million over that 5 years. Again, about 5.5 of that would actually be for equipment, and about 2.5 of that for services over that long period of time. And again, it's a very important contract, and we think by actually participating with the state purchases, we're actually getting very good prices, very competitive, very good prices for these very critical services for us. And with that, be happy to answer some questions, but if it really is a computer-related question, I'll have to ask for help.
That's good.
There's probably a high school around the corner.
Very well said. Questions, concerns by the board? So we've had, this is a I'm sorry, go ahead, Greg.
Well, actually, I do have a question on the diversity requirements.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, Utah doesn't either have the requirements or didn't include them for some reason. And I understand that this was primarily, we're buying products as opposed to services, but the maintenance and service contract, how are we going to handle, our diversity requirements for the, and I assume for the services portion of this?
Well, I would note that this isn't the only contract that we use related to IT services. And so, for example, in a lot of the software or support functions, that's where we have the control and actually can be more insistent on the diversity requirement. In this case, if we're going to use the state purchase requirement, we have to rely on their elements that they put in place. So we might wish for something a little bit different, but just given the overall importance of and deep discount that we get associated with this, we think it's important to advance. And I think what we have to do is sort of make up for that related to our other general fund related procurements and service requirements over time. But I would also note, again, most of this is buying stuff. And so that is, those are, again, not where you would see a great deal of diversity requirements generally.
Comments? Okay. Are we ready then to make a motion or to approve Resolution 14-09-46?
So moved.
Hear a motion? I hear a second. Any further discussion on the motion? Seeing none, then all those in favor of the motion to approve Resolution 14-09-46, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion is approved unanimously. Thank you. Let's move on to the last resolution, which is Resolution 14-09-47, which is authorizing a contract with David Evans and Associates for the conceptual and technical plan development services for the Southwest Corridor Transit Project.
Mr. Board President, members of the board, this contract is really to put us at the ready to be of great service to our fellow regional agency, Metro, which is actually leading the Southwest Corridor Project. As we always know, there is a role for Metro right now in terms of leading the overall planning parts of the process, but in order to make that as informative as it needs to be for the public, they asked TriMet to lead the engineering-related services. And of course, the engineering at this stage is at a very conceptual level. Right now, we do not have the capability in-house to support that, and so we have put together an RFP that would solicit services, a contract to help provide those services. Again, this is procured under the Federal Brooks Act, which means that qualifications are primarily what makes that overall selection. The qualification, it's a qualifications-based selection. Excuse me, I'll back up a bit. And I'd also note that all of the funding for this effort will be coming from intergovernmental funds associated with the Metro leadership and lead on the Southwest Corridor Project. This is a task order contract, so there is not a particular scope of work in place right now associated with this other than to provide conceptual and technical engineering support services for the Southwest Corridor. How this will progress is as the study progresses and needs additional information and services, we'll develop a task order that will then be advanced to David Evans in the case of the selected contractor here, and that will be priced. We will also ask at that time for the contractor to demonstrate their commitment to the disadvantaged business community and to make sure that they are strong in terms of their response in that realm as well. Again, we had two very qualified firms propose on this, David Evans and Parsons Brinckerhoff. By a relatively narrow score, David Evans was the selected contractor. I would note that we have worked with David Evans many times, as we have Parsons Brinckerhoff. Our experience is absolutely excellent in terms of the work that they do, and have shown a commitment to diversity related to the work on the Portland-Milwaukee project, where they've actually are achieving 16.7% DBE usage on that contract. The total value of the contract, $1,685,000. Again, that's only drawn down as task orders and funds are available and as work is required. So with that, again, this is putting us at the ready, but I would recommend your approval.
Questions, comments by the board? Seeing none, is there a motion then to approve Resolution 14-09-47? I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, then I'll call for vote on the motion. All those in favor of the motion to approve Resolution 14-09-47, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Seeing none, again, this motion is also approved unanimously. So that is the last piece of business to come before the board today. Does the board have any other items that should be considered by the board today, or does the staff have any? If not, then I'm going to adjourn the meeting for September 24th, 2014. Thank you, everybody, for coming. I really appreciate your hospitality and time here.
Thank you.